Ulonga tabati yada to ye ko madaifa inu to ye ko je lo fi bipa Ọba tala ọba takuntakun Ṣàngó Èṣù Ògún Ọya Ọ̀ṣun Kíni ṣẹ̀ṣe tán ṣe nílé yìí o ó jẹ́ lọ jára rẹ̀.
Alafia, peace and power, family. Welcome to another episode of the African Spirituality Experience. I am your host, Orisha Bemi, and we are back in the building with another prolific mind of the tribe, man. We back to back two powerful minds in a row, you know, within a 48-hour span. You know what I mean? We had a dope one on Friday, and now we back with another prolific mind of mind like none other. I remember the first time we did this, and every time we do it, I know it's gonna be epic. So without further ado, shout out to the tribe, shout out to the new Patreon members, shout out to the new channel subscribers, shout out to the new channel members. I appreciate all the love and support, family. Patreon will be getting this thing back cracking this week, and private community as well. We're gonna get this thing cracking this week as far as the calls with the private community. But without further ado, Baba Khepra, Ptah, what's good with you, Baba? Welcome back to the tribe, man. It's been a long time coming.
Definitely, family. You already know. You know what time it is, though. We past, present, and future. So it appears to be linear time is always going on simultaneous. We talk about the simultaneity of continuity.
Yes, sir. And you know, it's so funny how things be lining up. Because, you know, initially we were supposed to do this thing last night, right? But schedules and all kind of other stuff that are coming up. And even today, things came up. So try, please give us some grace, because tonight, you know, today I got, you know, bombarded with some work that I wasn't expecting, that kind of threw some things off. But we still here now. But with that being said, I guess it was destiny, because here we are again, two sons of Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
So Baba without Yansa.
Yes, sir. So I felt like this probably was divine for it to happen the way it did at this divine time. So with that, Baba, man, before we get into the heavy the meal, I want to kind of share a couple of hors d'oeuvres, because the last time we spoke, which was I think last week, and we hadn't spoke on the phone prior to that for probably, I don't know, it's been a little minute, you know, but you know, we've been in contact constantly as far as texting and communicating and all that, but we haven't actually chopped it up. But on that conversation, man, I was grateful that we had the opportunity to do it, because as always, it was another prolific, powerful conversation. I'm talking about, like, it was very powerful, and the synchronicity and you know what I'm saying, the alignment, doing the alignment was, you know, unlike none other. And it's like it's always that way, but I feel like this was even deeper, because there was so many synchronicities, even to like nature, even to, you know what I mean, like to the plant life, like to Asar, to Kemet, to, you know what I'm saying, like the transitioning of the light, you know, the coming forth by day, you know what I mean, like there's so much that we talked about, bro. So it's like, for that conversation to happen that night, and the very next day I'm working with, you know, a client in a consultation, and then the same Ashe and the same energy that emitted through that conversation with us the night before came through the next day, sitting with the oracle. So I'm just like, yo, this is amazing. This is amazing, because it's just like, you know, you can't make this stuff up, man. You can't make it up. You can't make it up. And actually where I want to say the alignment was from how it transitioned from that night to the day, coming forth by day, by the way, it was about the Uraeus. It was about the cobra and the vulture on the crown of the kings and queens of Kemet. You feel me? So it's like, that's where the correlation came in. So it's powerful, the alignment that we're seeing right now. Matter of fact, shout out to Miss Sekhmet Ba'at. I believe she's still in Kemet right now as we speak. So we're going to send some love out there to Kemet while we're here in the States, and we're going to make this thing do what it do. So with that, bye-bye. We got a lot on the menu tonight, man. Where you want to start with to try to start serving this food for thought?
All right. Thanks a lot for that, Baba. You know, and you know, I'm gonna start with the early church, okay? Because this is very important. You know, now there's a part in the Bible that speaks about, in him do we move and have our being, right? And you're talking about how all the synchronicity has been taking place, because it's almost like the same information is being channeled through different bodies. Why is that? You know, but we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start with Origin. Interesting name. Origin is actually one of the church fathers, and he's actually one of my favorite, because a lot of people don't know this. But Origen's name literally breaks down to mean one who is born of Heru. Yes. When you get a chance, look at the etymology of the father, church father by the name of Origen. Our boy Origen believed in reincarnation. He also believed that each and every one of us is going to obtain salvation and return back to God regardless, right? And that kind of flies in the face of the modern church. Now, Origen, to me, he's one of the most fascinating and controversial of the early Christian fathers and thinkers. You know, now you're going to notice something interesting, and that is he never got canonized as a saint. Now he's a brilliant, scholar. He was also a Greek philosopher. He knew Hebrew traditions. He knew the scriptures, and he actually tried to build a grand universal system that explained the nature of the soul, the cosmos, salvation, and God's nature with philosophical precision. But his ideas were so bold and far-reaching that later church authorities viewed them as dangerous, and even thought he was, somebody to kind of like hide. There's like, okay, we're going to acknowledge that you have to start this thing up, but we can't let your teachings get out there because it might end up setting some people free. Okay. So he taught, okay, these are the things that were frowned upon. He taught Christianity had an aspect of universalism. He taught about the pre-existence of the soul. He had a non-literal interpretation of the scripture. He taught that souls existed before birth, in other words. Okay. And that they came down into these bodies and would eventually return back to the divine through purification and spiritual growth. And he believed all beings, check this out, demons included, would ultimately be restored to a final reconciliation called apokatastasis. Apokatastasis, that's what it was. Apokatastasis. Greek word is spelled like Apokatastasis. Yeah, apokatastasis. That's what it was. So this universal salvation, it contradicted the emerging Orthodox view that salvation depended on faith, sacraments, and the church's authority. Because, we kind of all went to church at some point in time, and one of the first things they did was teach you to forgive, but give your power away and not claim the power as your own, right? Always seeing something outside of yourself, never thinking that you're good enough because you're taught that you're a sinner. No matter what you do, all your intentions are just stained, and everything that you do is just full of dirt, right? All your good intentions are like dirty rags. So Origen rejected this idea of eternal damnation. And remember, the Pope recently said that hell is just a state of mind, and people are going in on the Pope because of that, but the Pope is telling the truth. So he also put emphasis on spiritual evolution through cosmic cycles, right? He didn't agree with the Gregorian idea of linear time, which came much later due to Roman influence. He dealt with the aspect of the soul's ascent made into the physical body and basically becoming purifying. And it was too philosophical and too inclusive for the church fathers who wanted to have control, especially when you're dealing with Constantine, who wanted political power to keep his empire together. But that's a different story for another time. It kind of gets away from where I'm trying to go. So ultimately, Origen's universalism and his belief in the soul's preexistence, it threatened the developing doctrines of grace, pistis, right? Judgment and some ecclesiastical control, that you had a priesthood taking, saying, oh, well, hey, if you don't do what we say, you're not going to get into heaven unless you pay these tithes and basically do what the church tells you to do. And I mean, they went to extremes to control people. They burned a whole bunch of books and libraries and everything else. So think about it. If all souls eventually return to God, then salvation is not exclusive. And if souls existed before birth, then identity is not defined by one single lifetime. If scripture is symbolic rather than literal, then authority shifts from the institution to the individual seeker. And for these reasons, centuries after the death of Origen's teachings, all that knowledge was locked away and condemned. And it's not that they didn't have any brilliance, because they were, but because they offered a vision for the church where knowledge, purification, and spiritual development mattered more than obedience, fear, and some rigid dogma. in which they try to keep you scared to live and scared to die. They got people scared to live and they got people scared to die. They got people not knowing whether they're coming or going here. Okay.
Yeah.
So
all by design.
exactly. To keep you off balance. Anything to keep you off balance. Because if they can keep you off balance, keep you bickering and arguing and not knowing anything for certain, then, you know, they can basically steer you any way they want you to go. Pardon me.
No, that's facts. Big facts.
So, you know, so the Greeks, where did they come in, right? Of course, you have, you know, you may have looked at George James Stolen Legacy back in the day, which is a must read for the early scholar.
Phenomenal.
You know, the Greeks absolutely, they absorbed Kemetic teachings, aka Egyptian teachings, right, about the soul and immortality. And though they reshaped them, the Greeks reshaped them through their own philosophical lens. The Greek thinkers always had to travel back to Kemet for initiation and study. And this is an example with Plato, Pythagoras, Solon, and later Plutarch, in whom you could finally find like all these volumes about Osiris and the resurrection in the ancient Cometian festivals that are recorded in his works. So it's the split of the knowledge that Kemet is the source of ancient wisdom by the ancient world, and Kemet had already developed a multi-layered model of the soul, a doctrine of judgment, right? You see this, you see that that picture, that scroll in the British Museum that they have copied in so many books of the judgment scene and everything else, right? And the 42 judges, and basically having your heart weighed with the feather and the scale. So this was a system where it taught that you had to earn an aspect of your immortality. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's an aspect of consciousness being immortal, but as far as your identity is concerned, that to immortalize that had to be earned. All right. If you remember Ron Ephraim teachings in the Middle Netter, I believe it was either volume 1 or 2, where he speaks about immortality, that is reincarnation, or immortality was the ability to retain your memories, retain your identity across incarnations. That's what he said. All right, so Kemet was the place where the Greek thinkers encountered all this wisdom. They translated Egyptian spiritual science into Greek. You got this Hermetica. And if you open up the Hermetica, it literally tells them, it was funny, do not translate this information into Greek. It literally tells them that, and they translate it anyway and have it in the Greek as well as in the Latin. So you got also a bunch of Greek philosophers did not necessarily agree. They shared core ideas, but if you notice, Aristotle was trying to prove Plato wrong. And there's so much that Aristotle written in the time in which he wrote it, in a time of war, you're beginning to wonder if the man even was real, or if there was a bunch of pseudo writers who were basically usurping and plagiarizing information under the pseudonym Aristotle. Anyway, Plato taught that the soul is unborn, is eternal, is indestructible, originating from the realm of what they call forms, right? And it falls into the body and must purify itself to return to its true home. Now, this also parallels the ancient Kemetic idea that the Ba and the Ka must be purified to become an Ak. Okay, so you say, what's up, Ak? What's up, brother? An Ak is actually an illuminated aspect of the being. So, or your being, when it's purified, illuminated, it's called an Ak or Ku, depending on how you want to look at it. So some say that the Ku represents divine intelligence, Ak represents radiant immortality of the spirit. The soul has multiple parts, right? So you learn in Greek philosophy, there's the logos, which is the rational aspect of the soul, the thymos, which is the spiritual, and you have your epithemia, which is the appetitive. Then in the Cometian word, you would discover that they had a bunch of parts and components to the soul as well. You probably have seen this in Stolen Legacy. Like you have the Ka, which is your vital essence, the Ba, which is your personal personality. You have the Ub or the Ib, you have which is your heart. So like in the Yoruba, they have the Okan and the Egbe. There's the Ren, which is your name and your identity. And then you also have what is called the Kaibit, which is your shadow. And then there's this aspect in which we're trying to reach, which is called the Ak, which is when you activate the light body and you can basically move around the cosmos as a being of light. So this deals with alchemy. The Greeks simplified what the Cometians had articulated, and they said that the soul must be purified to survive death. So you have Plato, and there's Phaedo, and there's the Republic. It describes the soul as undergoing judgment and purification. It's clear that they were talking about their own version of the weighing of the heart. The Greeks adopted that idea that immortality must be earned and not assumed. Then there's the idea of the reincarnating soul, right? Pythagoras and Plato. So both taught that the soul reincarnates until it becomes pure enough to escape this cycle. And a concept of this is present in the Cometian belief that the soul must pass through what is called the duat, and it must do this through various transformations. So we got this idea that continues to perpetuate itself in different ways. Now, Kemet was one of the Greeks' primary sources of metaphysical ideas. Then you got Herodotus, who wrote that the Greeks learned the doctrine of the soul's immortality from Cometians. Plutarch, we talked about how he also had his own version of the story of Asar. There's Iambicus, who claimed Pythagoras was initiated in the Egyptian temples. Plato, referring to Egyptian wisdom, reportedly, especially true to Timaeus in the Phaedrus. So Kemet had already developed the doctrine of judgment. All right, everything you see in your Bible about the doctrine of the soul was pretty much there in a way, okay? But it's been taken and interpreted in a way that you can't see it if you're listening to your preacher. You have to do your own research and you'll see where it connects, okay? So there's the doctrine of soul purification. There's reincarnation, which was removed from the church in the 4th century by Justinian, who said that whoever believed in the monstrous doctrine of reincarnation, let them be anathema. So that was maybe the 4th Council of Chalcedon or somewhere around that time, when they basically said, we're going to get rid of reincarnation. You cannot have this doctrine in the church because we got to get this idea of somebody dying for your sins a job here, okay? So there's the doctrine of cosmic cycles and the doctrine of name as keys to survival. So when you studied your Cometian works, like your Book of Coming Forth by Day, pyramid texts, coffin texts, and a lot of your funerary texts, you discover that when you go into certain regions, especially like if it's the Duat or the Book of Caverns, you have to know the names of the various guardians in order to get past them. So that's another thing. That's where a lot of your magic comes in. You'll see this magic in Judaism, like Kabbalistic traditions. When you're going to the spheres, you got to know the name of this aspect of God, the name of this angel, and the name of this particular Sephiroth. The same stuff. They got it from one place. There's no need of, trying to like debate about it. Bada bing, bada boom. They also inherited this idea translated into their philosophical language. So the core Cometian teachings of adopted by them, which you had Ma'at, which is straightness all the way. Some people say that Ma'at dealt with purity as well. We know it's law, order, justice, righteousness, and then reciprocity. Identity, you're in. Consciousness, the Ba and the vital force, Ka, unity, the Ak. Okay, so if you have your notes, you should have had that written down by now. If you got your pen and pad, boom. Now, the same principle Plato expresses when he says the soul must become harmonious, rational, and purified in order to ascend, right? The Greeks did not invent the idea of immortality. They kind of used their own way of describing what Kemet had known 10,000 years before Greek civilization even existed. So they acknowledged absolutely that it flowed into other traditions as well. Now, when you look at the occult, you look at magical systems, there's Kabbalah, like I mentioned earlier, and how that was filtered. They shaped that into Hebrew thought with the Kabbalah. You'll find where they came up with a newer version of the Kabbalah in Spain, like the Zohar and those teachings that talks about the immortality of the soul, and also talking about returning you back to what they call the primordial man, which was actually a male and female, that they call the Adam Cadman. And I look at it as this way. When you activate both of your brain hemispheres, right? There's a masculine and feminine aspect of your brain and of who you are. You have the ability to decipher, discern, and break things down. And the other aspect of you, it synthesizes and integrates and brings things together. So the way of cognition, so you can put things in their proper place. So when you was going to the ancient schools of wisdom, you were trained on how to do this. Now, when they talked about the doctrine of the soul, how it entered Christianity, it emerged in a world saturated Greek philosophy.
Oh boy. Tribe, can y'all still I know I'm still on. Can y'all still see Baba Ptah? I know I dealt with some of this crap Friday when we had Dr. Valentine on, man. It's been a lot going on with this technology, these platforms. But if y'all do see him or hear him, okay. Okay. I got y'all.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, this is
all right.
Yeah.
So, early Christianity emerged in a world that was saturated with philosophy. The Christian thinkers like Origen, Clement of Alexandria, and Justin Martyr, and later Augustine, wrote about the soul and how they were dwelling places from a lineage that began in Kemet. Okay, so that's been established. But there's also other works. Now, we talked about the Egyptian Book of the Dead a lot, right? And you notice how a lot of people in the Kemetic community, and this is not a shot at anyone, but a lot of them kind of treat it like a Bible. Now, I sent you the chart. I'm not able to pull it up on my screen for some reason.
I got it.
But is it possible you can, if you could pull that up and just show the different aspects of the book of coming forth by day, the different people in which it's named after, and you're going to see something. And that is, what you'll see is that the papyrus of Ani was just one. Okay? You had a whole bunch of different books of the dead, or Predem Heruim Ger, books of coming forth by day from night. Meant for the individual who was going through his form of transformation, as the priesthood would basically move him and move him to the Duat, and to get him to join the ancestors in the afterlife. So this is where I must say that the book of coming forth by day, that is not a Bible. Okay, so you have like hundreds of different so-called books of the dead for different people, but the most popular we have is the book of Anu. You see? So let's see if I can expand it where I'm at.
Let me see. I might be able to if I can move us off, but I don't know if the tribe.
These are just some examples. You got the papyrus of Nu, you got the papyrus of Nakhet, you got the papyrus of Hunefer, and the papyrus of Yuya, and so on. Right? So you got a whole bunch of different papyrus. And the reason why I wanted to show is I want to put things about how it's not so much that they were obsessed with death. What they were is they were masters of the science of immortality. So the whole idea of ancient Kemet was how you would reach and obtain immortality. That's why the pyramids are lined up with the stars, because it's talking about someone being transformed into a light being and entering the star system of Orion and becoming a being of light, right? And living forever, and eventually even being transformed into a star. So when the Cometians were talking about someone becoming a superstar, they were serious about being a star. In fact, the word Seba means star. So a teacher is considered a star, but guess what? So it's the student. So the word Seba is the name for both teacher and student in the Cometian tradition. So each and every one of us are here to shine. So then when you get in Western magic, like for instance, the Book of the Law and Aleister Crowley, they kind of took from that, talking about each and every one of us as a star. Well, that comes from Cometian tradition of long ago. So yes, basically it's talking about one of our stages of evolution is to become a star that never burns out. So if you can go to the other set of manuscripts we have, as far as the Cometian funerary texts, and you'll notice that they talk about the Old Kingdom, starting with the pyramid text. You have the early Coffin text, you have the Book of the, and these all illustrated the maps of the afterlife and the routes through what's called the Duat, right? Especially when you get to the the Book of Two Ways, which was established during the Middle Kingdom. And then you have the Amdwat, Book of Amdwat, which is the Book of the Hidden Chamber, where you talk about the night and the day and the journey of Ra made through the Dwat and the king's union with the sun, becoming one with the immortal sun, in which New Agers today would probably call the solar logos and whatnot. Okay? And so you have the Book of Caverns, the Book of the Earth. You have the Book of the Heavenly Cow, which also explains creation. It dives into judgment, as well as separation of heaven and earth. Okay, the separation of lower self, higher self, and eventually how that must come together, be harmonized. But you have the rituals that talked about how to do things, how to bring forth energies, how to communicate with those on the other side, and to understand that your ancestors were not forgotten, but they're continuing to evolve and still be communicated with on the other side. So you got the Book of Nut, the books of breathing. Another thing about ancient Commission tradition, you'll notice that there's the Book of Purim Haru, there's the Book of Sniffing the Air, because they understood the science of breath. Now, when you look into the book of Plutarch's work, where they preserved the ancient story of Osiris, who is actually Osar, it talks about how he was murdered by 72 conspirators. How they grabbed his coffin, they threw him in a coffin, they sealed his shut with lead, and therefore Osir suffocated inside the coffin, and he died, right? His breath was cut off. And what was used to cut off his breath? Lead. When you get into alchemical tradition, you learn that lead is basically the earliest stage and the grossest of matter. Eventually, you take it through various stages from the lead, right? As far as like lead, and eventually silver, eventually gold. And gold represented the purest form of wisdom and consciousness. It represented when all the drops were separated, and that gold was basically the purity or the flesh of Ra, in which each and every one of us are obtaining to have. Ra was known as not only the sun, he was made out of gold. So when you look at gold, you're looking at star metal, because gold is also created from supernovas. So the Cometians knew something about the power of the sun. So it really is a solar metal. However, each and every one of us is supposed to become like light beings. So when you reach that state of gold, it becomes not so much as just an external process. And by the way, alchemy is real. I've actually have seen someone create what is called a plant stone. I have held the stone in my hand, and I could feel the energy going up my arm, causing my whole body to vibrate. So yes, the process of transmuting lead into gold is a real process. It's not just superstitious, and it's not just symbolic. Okay, you becoming a being of light is also 100% real, because in so many ways you actually are a being of light, and your body is held together with 14 pounds of pressure per square inch. And you're even made up of matter, but matter is not as solid as it appears to be. So what's holding you together? Even your body and your cells have what is called biophotons, which each cell emits a very weak level of light, but it can't be picked up on. So
Ptah,
going back to,
can you hear? No, do you mind if I chime in just for one quick second?
Yes, by all means.
Because when you're talking about like the transmutation, I got an echo. I don't know what the heck. But anyway, can you hear me?
Let me try something. Let me do this.
Okay.
How about now?
Okay. Yeah, nah, okay, we're good. I don't know. They might have been on my end though, man, because I heard myself echoing, which is weird. But when you were talking about Ra and then talking about alchemy and the ability to transmute, you know what I mean, like different elements, I want to give a shout out to African Creation Energy real quick. I got probably about, I don't know how many of their books they got. I mean, how many of their books that I have, but I want to give a huge shout out to them because they teach how to create some of these scientific experiments within their work. And this one right here, since we're talking about Ra and we're talking about the sun, family, do yourself a favor and grab this because it's a very, very, very powerful piece of work. Straight up real talk. So I just wanted to share that because they talk about how to create electricity. They talk about how to, you know, transmute different types of elements of nature. And I won't go too far into it because, you know, I want to get off track, but I want to give a shout out to them in that work. And if anybody out there is interested in learning a little bit more about alchemy and how to transmute different elements into other elements, that's a great place to start. So
okay, I can't
that's
really
all I
hear
want to
you.
throw that in there real quick. You can't hear me? Hello? Oh, Lord. All right, try. We're going to work through this thing, man, because as usual, it seems like we got some
All right.
technical difficulties. Can you hear me
Can
now,
you hear
Baba?
me? If you can hear me,
I hear you. Yeah.
Raise your
I
hand.
hear you.
I can't really hear anything from your part.
Oh, boy.
From your end.
I hear you, Baba.
All right, let me
I hear
see
you.
what's going on. Hold on a second.
I hear you. All right, let me see. Yeah, we got some foolishness going on, family. So I'm gonna holler at Baba real quick and ask him to go out and come back in so we can try to get this this technical difficulties under control real quick. Let me see. Okay, can you hear me now, Baba? Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Y'all bear with me for 1 second, try. We'll go ahead and text Baba and let him know how we're gonna try to work through this thing, because this is it's not a surprise to me. We was dealing with this foolishness with Dr. Valentine Friday, so y'all already know what it is, family. Whenever you're having these types of transmissions of energy and information, it seems to be there's always past interference on the play for some odd reason. And not that the reason is too odd, but hold on 1 second, y'all.
All right, can you hear me?
You sound loud and clear, but I don't see you now. But I was just telling the tribe, we dealt with some of this on Friday, but it's like, you know, whenever you're having this type of conversation with this type of information, it seems like it's always past interference on the play. But that's what we're working through tonight. We're going to continue to work through it. We're not going to let this slow us down and stop us. So can you hear me now, Baba?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of you got to get back on track. Let's see, what was I?
I'm not surprised. You were talking about Ra and the sun, and then the ability to create with alchemy, and then you were speaking about someone that you know personally who actually created something with alchemy, and then you held the element, you held the stone or whatever the creation was that they created with the process of alchemy. And then I had kind of chimed in, you know, just to talk about this book, The Nine Ether Re-Engineering, you know, in regards to the sun and Ra. So with that, that's where we was at, and then we started fighting with this technology. So but you good now. I hear you.
Ogunde.
Yes, sir. Look, I'm about to go spray him down real quick too, because I see what's going on.
Yeah,
yes,
you know, for real.
Yeah.
Right, but let me know when we back in. I'll go.
You good? We good. Let's go. We rolling. We rolling. It's all yours, Bubba. It's all yours.
All right, cool. So we were talking about there's an alchemist. He actually has a book called Real Alchemy. His name is Robert Bartlett. So you might want to check it out. But he's the one who brought me the plant stone. Actually, he brought us a plant stone when he was having a presentation on alchemy. And I held that in my hand. That's when I could feel the vibration go up my arm and into my body. You know, so this is when I saw that, oh no, alchemy is a literal process.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, and to me, what that was an allusion to the development of the soul. Okay. Because being philosophical as it is, you may see yourself as doing one particular thing, but you're also doing something within yourself as well. So it appears to be external work is actually the inner work. Hence the great work. So we got the soul that ascends through the realms. You know, we talked about the duat, the gates, the trials. You know, that Ra has to go through the various trials, the various gates, where he will face an individual entity and get past that entity. The Greeks brought this idea as the 12 labors of Hercules, basically the sun going through the 12 houses and so on. You also got Plato's ascent to the spheres. You got Enoch's ascent to the spheres. It's the same process. Even with Christianity, where Paul, in the Bible, there's a place where it talks about Paul making it to third heaven. What's interesting, Paul is the only one that went to other regions of of heaven, but only made it to third. So that should tell you something right there. Anyway, the soul is also weighed, is also purified. It talks about this in the Quran as well. And I want you to see how universal these teachings are, because the rascals in power keeps everybody arguing, fighting, and debating on who's right and who's wrong, and they miss the point of the whole thing. So going back to Origin in particular, how he perceived that commission and Greco-Egyptian idea that the soul undergoes multiple stages of purification, and that the salvation is ultimately restoration, not eternal punishment, okay? Not from their point of view. Now, in the commission Greek ideas, how they entered Kabbalah, we see where it emerged in medieval Jerusalem or Judaism, and its roots go back to Hellenistic Judaism, which also comes from Alexandria, okay, where the Jews lived along with the Commission priests and the Greek philosophers. So they kind of all got together and merged these philosophies. So those who are familiar with Hermetic magic, that's where this comes from, okay? It comes from a marriage of these various traditions in conglomeration in Alexandria. And eventually they developed different books, how to work the occult. Some of that magic made its way into Europe. Some of it made it into the East. Some of it made it into Sufism, which is the mysticism of Islam eventually. So a lot of this is called Neoplatonism, which is heavily, obviously, Commission metaphysics. Then you have the Gnostic tradition. There's Gnostic Judaism. There's Gnostic Christianity. That preserved the Commission ideas that the soul has to go through an ascension process and return back to a state from which it once was before it came into matter. So again, you got a review. You got your Ka, your Ba, your Ab, you got your Ren. You got the Shatwat, which is the covering, or the Kaibit, which is the shadow, and your Ak. But the Kabbalah, which a lot of people are learning about in Western metaphysics, you have the Nefesh, which is your animal spirit. You have your Rak, your Ruach, right? Another aspect of your spirit, which is your intelligence. Then you have your Neshama. The Yeshama is basically connecting you to the universal mind, right? In both systems, all these systems describe the soul as multidimensional with layers that must be harmonized, you see? So you'll see something similar, because you'll notice that in the Yoruba tradition, the soul or the self has different components. You have your Ori, you have your Oriyanu, you have your Epanri, which is your self that dwells in heaven, and so on. That'd be equivalent to the Nishamna. That'd be equivalent to what they call the Para-Atman in the Indian tradition. So the teachings also suggest that we're here, but we're not here. That it's almost like we're projections from somewhere else, okay? And the whole thing is that you begin to understand that we're actually connected at the top. Now, this is where we start getting into the philosophy and the idea of living, right? And why it's important. Because there's an aspect of purification and identity at play. The Commission, they taught that the heart must be light and the name must be preserved, right? Kabbalah, it teaches that the soul must be rectified. They call it tikkun, and the divine name must be known. So both teach that immortality requires identity and continuity. So the cycles of creation, you got creation, destruction. There's always something that's taking place. The Bible says or suggests that the earth was purified first by water, and its next purification is by fire. We talked about that before. There's also teaching that your first baptism is by water, and your second baptism is by fire. Now, I'll have to add to that. They'll say that the baptism is getting the Holy Ghost itself. I'll say that the reason, and you may hear about ancient traditions and traditions that are still alive and among Polynesians and so on, about how they enter the altered state of trance. They can walk on hot coals, and some even report walking on lava without their feet getting burnt, right? And the idea of Ptah, where, initiates of Shango may have piercings come into their body and it's poured out. There's no evidence of them being pierced and so on, because you can alter your state of consciousness. These teachings were meant to get you to change your state of consciousness So as you go through the evolution of this planet in this realm, when it goes through the great purification processes that affects our world through the great year, we're able to survive them. You see? So if you can pull up that picture of the hands reaching out of the flames real quick.
Oh yeah, and real quick, while I do that, Baba, I had a shout out to Don Coolio Swa was asking, did you mention a book about alchemy, or were you just teaching about alchemy? Because he asked the question. Hold on, let me pull it up. He asked the question. The name of the book is Alchemy, so I wasn't sure. I shared The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which is a powerful piece of work. But were you mentioning the book, or were you just talking about personal experiences that you've had with alchemy? So that way I can make sure that I answer the question for the brother Don.
A little bit of both, but the name of the book that I had referred to is called Real Alchemy by Robert Bartlett. And he literally teaches you how to use alchemical or make alchemical, like starting out with spagyrics. He teaches you how to do plant alchemy and how to do alchemy in the comfort of your yard and in your home with appliances that you can use in your household. Okay. So you have to worry about trying to buy all these flasks that can get you shut down because the police can knock on your door, think you have a meth lab and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's called Real Alchemy by Robert Bartlett. It's a pretty good book, and he has another book that follows that called The Way of the Crucible by the same author. I met him in person, and he actually lives in the state of Washington, to my understanding, and he also, for a while, he would allow people, he teaches online too, but for a while, he would allow people to literally come and visit his compound so you could see what he does for yourself. Okay.
Real quick, Baba, name one more time for the what's the name of the author again in the book?
His name is Robert Bartlett.
Okay.
Now I want to say, so I want to say it's BARTLET, and he wrote another book called Way of the Crucible.
I sure appreciate you. Yeah.
So,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
So when you look at this, we're talking about alchemy in many different forms. Like if you get into Sufism, they talk about the alchemy of the heart. And alchemy always comes with a prima materia, with the potential to be anything where it's broken down into pieces, the parts purified and brought back together again. The same story can be found with Osir. The same story can be found with the calabash of the Yoruba tradition. The same thing can be said about the body of Israel. Same metaphor. Okay. So immortality is preserved by identity across transitions. How is that? Because you have to become an integrated being. So the mummification process involved wrapping the body so that it does not fall apart in its traversing through the Dawat. When Anu or Ampur, the ferryman, is taking you across the various abyss or the abyss through the afterlife and the realm of the ancestors. Once again, there's a wrapping to basically keep it together. When Ampu, aka Anubis, is the one that helps wrap the body up and make sure that it's preserved. And it's called a Sahu, which means an incorruptible body. What's interesting is that Sahu, and Sa is the name for Orion, which is the star system that we see, and we see the belt of Orion where the pyramids are all lined up, right? Some people say that's coincidence, but the thing about it,
now let me. I hate interrupting, but I have to, because you just triggered something in me that you are the mind that I would ask this to see where the correlation is. But I did a dope show not too long ago on Aganyu, right? And then when you know the stories behind him with traversing across the waters and across the rivers and things of that nature, his story, right? When you just spoke about Ampu with the traversing in between the realms, do you feel like there's a correlation between those two deities? Because I don't know if the tribe that's on now have seen all of our other shows and how you broke down how the correlation between the Orisha and the Commissions and the Netchers, you know what I mean, how they all align. But do you see any type of alignment with that? Because man, that kind of That's it never registered in my mind before. But when the way you just said that, and I just did a presentation not too long ago on Aganyu with all this nature going on with the volcanoes erupting, and a lot of people are not familiar with Aganyu. So when you're talking about traversing through the rivers, and then you know what I'm saying, like you go from realm to realm, when you're talking about Ampu, do you feel like there's some sort of correlation between those two?
I don't see a correlation necessarily with Agayu. They feel like a different energy. What I will say is Ampu, you know, they feel very, I mean, to me they feel different.
Gotcha.
But
okay.
I see where Ampu would have a lot to do with awakening or helping to open the aspect of yourself so that the life force could flow through. Agayu has something to do with that as well. Okay.
And that's why I was like,
the awakening fire.
That's why I said if anybody gonna have something about that, it's gonna be you. But yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow, but I'm telling you, you triggered something when you said that. I'm like, yo, that sounds familiar. You know what I mean? But I don't want to interrupt, man. I don't want to.
What I will say is that maybe they both have something to do with the pyramid, because Agayu represents the power, the energy flowing upward, right? Yes, he's the father of Shango, and the process of the water, the fire, the life force going up the spine is Shango Loro, and it's talking about the pot in which the energy rises up the spine. So there's an aspect of the life force, and also Agayu has something to do with semen retention. That's another story for another time. I learned that from another Baba who's into alchemy. So Agayu, being the father of Shango, definitely has a lot to do with the life force. Shango and the awakened life force, the life force being activated to get the will to move where it needs to go.
Yeah.
You see?
Definitely.
Now, one of the things I wanted to speak about is the pyramids aligning with Orion's belt. Is that when we look into Mexico, have that same type of pyramid alignment, right?
Yes.
They have the same type of teachings of humans becoming gods.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it is said that in that place, and I went and visited Teotihuacan years ago. Some say it's the place where the gods ascend. There's another translation that talks about the place where man becomes God. So Ifa even teaches that, you know, human beings become Orisha. You know, that's in our teachings. That's in the teachings of Ifa. Okay. And it also refers in the Jobe, it refers as the Ori as an ocean, because we're tapping into an ocean of consciousness in which funnels through each and every one of us. You see. So we look at immortality and the preservation of the identity. What exactly does that mean? So the Commission, they talk about the Ren, and they talk about the Ak, which is the immortal self. The Christian mystics talk about the purified soul, and the Kabbalists, the Yeshira, which is the unified essence. Now, remember how you and I kept on having these correlations of things happening? That's because we had tapped in. A lot of times when somebody is about to call you and you haven't talked to them in months, but you sense they're going to call you, and they call you in about 5 minutes from that time, it's because you remember that they were about to call you.
Yeah.
You see? So we have been controlled into thinking that time, and they give us this concept of time, of it's linear and everything is always moving forward. But time moves forward and backwards is forward. I'll give you an example. I asked my oracle years ago, because there's this woman I was dealing with, and we had so many crazy similarities. I asked the oracle, am I going to see this woman in my next incarnation? And it gave me a pretty interesting answer. It kind of gave me the answer of a yes or no. And the reason why it gave me that answer is because I was thinking linearly. So eventually I end up finding out or learning that I was going to incarnate with her into the past. Our next life was going to go into the so-called past. And the reason why is because todo que pasa ahora, everything is happening now. So Isis says that I am yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and no mortal man sees past my veil.
Facts. Big facts.
But the reason, but we're mortal because we identify with time. And what that brother Saul Williams said when he said, "Where's my Nagas at?" He said, "They're lost in time." Well, that's how they had lost you. They got you living check to check. They got you on a paycheck. They got you identifying with temporary things, which causes your spirit to lose power. We're going to talk about that, right? So Christianity, it emphasizes grace over knowledge. But early thinkers like Origen preserved the older idea that the soul must be purified, educated, and transformed to retain identity. It preserved the idea that most faithfully, the soul must undergo what is called tikkun, which is basically refinement through surviving cosmic cycles, the same way that Ra survives by going through the duat and being able to traverse the duat and getting past all the negative and demonic forces, right, that wants to attack Ra in his boat. But Ra adapts and defeats them all, including Apap, which means the great death, which is trying to pull this life force back into inertia. So Ra is also your life force. Ra is your inner sun. Just like Ra is the sun on the outside, you have a sun on the inside. So as above, so below, as within, so without. I don't get into this debate or this argument about whether or not the Orishas are within us or outside of us, because there really is no out there and in here. There's only the divine, and within the divine do we move and have our being. So just like you're within the divine is within you, and that's how everything works, because you live in a holographic universe where every part contains the whole. I cannot stress this enough. So there's arguing, just because you read literature that's about thousands of years old, okay? And the thing about it is that they intuitively knew this or understood it on a different angle. You have to ask about it because, we're caught up in the English language that thinks so linearly and breaks things down into a sequential way of looking at things that we cannot imagine the future being in the past and the past being in the future. And everything happening simultaneously, you see. Because when you get beyond this time and space program of this hologram, all there is the now. And when you spell now backwards, you have one. One. Not only do you win, but you also have number one, because that oneness is allness and allness is oneness. That's why nothing can really forever potentially never come back, because even impermanence, there's a Buddhist teaching of impermanence by I want to say Yagaguna. Anyway, I might be butchering his name because I haven't said his name in a long time. But anyways, the Bodhisattva teaching that it talks about the law of Nagarjuna. My bad, Nagarjuna. He talks about the law of impermanence. So perhaps impermanence works both ways. Just like you cannot be forever doesn't mean that you can forever be annihilated either. You see, impermanence, forever, eternal change and continuity, impermanence. Yeah. Buddha said that the only thing that's constant in this world is change. Going back to the commission idea, right? Because this is the idea of the concept of defeating age and so on. Now, from a scientific view, right? Is there evidence of immortality? This is a mystery for a lot of us, because you see, your scientific model is based on empiricism, which will not allow you to get too philosophical, okay? And a lot of times this model, this British model, is kind of hypocritical to me. First of all, they say, oh, you can't prove this, you can't prove that, so we can't recognize it. But they have not proven the theory of evolution, otherwise it wouldn't be a theory.
Facts.
But they teach it in school as if it's well established. But it can't be if it's still a theory. So what's the difference between believing a man evolved from a monkey and man was created from clay? Where's the argument here? Because, well, both things in the realm of meditation, speculation, and so on, right? But the thing about it, you definitely are made of the elements of the earth. Because once you die, you go back into that. Okay? Or once you appear to die. So, first off, everything in the universe is made of information. Okay? Not just information coming to us through our phones and our computers, but also from atoms, energy, and of course, well, there's ourselves. Information is the instructions of how things are arranged, as well as how they behave.
Mm.
Now, we can say that our universe is informed, informed by a universal mind.
Bubba, real quick,
Or
man. I apologize, but I can't mute this voice that I hear. Before you go in, I know you're about to go in, and we spoke about the church and all that earlier. So before you go in and go deep diving, can you share the difference between the atom, ATOM, and the Adam, ADAM, and the parallels of what you're about to go into, please?
I see.
Please and thank you, sir.
Well, I love it.
Yes, sir.
Well, there's your atom. Which is, there's two aspects of Adam. There's Adam Kadmon, which is a primordial man, right? According to Kabbalah. There's Adam that also represents man according to Hebrew mysteries. Now, some schools of thought saying that Adam represents the man or the being that came after Atum, which is the God, the fire, or the netter that preceded the aspect of Adam. What I say about that is that there's Adam and there's Atum. There's Atum, which represents Atum, which is the fire that keeps us all alive and arose from the primordial hill on the top of the mountain Tatinid, which is Ptah. Then you have the Greek idea of the atom. They screwed up miserably because they said that atom means cannot be split. But the thing about it is that they've been splitting atoms for a long time here. So I say the idea of the atom not being able to be split is kind of a misnomer. Secondly, there's the primordial atom, and then there's what you call Jesus or Yeshua, which is the second atom. There's Adam that represents the man of the soil, the dirt, which is actually a male and female, because if you read the Holy Biblia, it talks about how in the beginning, Adam was male and female, and was later on split to become Adam and Eve. But Adam originally started as male and female. Now, Atum, or Atum Kataman is the primordial fire and consciousness that is shaped and molded by Ptah, or comes on the back of Ptah. So each and every one of us are Atum. And the Kemetic word for mortal man, or the collective of the human species, is the idea of Adam and Eve. All that stuff comes out of Kemet. But when you get the Sumerian idea, you get the Babylonian idea, and they talk about atom and they talk about these particular variations, there's different understandings. So atom, you have the atom, which is the the particles that make up structure, right? And then you have the internal fire. You are a pyramid. What does a pyramid mean? Eidos means fire in the middle. Each and every one of us is a pyramid, and each and every one of us is a living aspect of Atum, which basically came and promotes from out of nothingness. So in that form, you're a consciousness that was born from the primordial matter in the form of a sacred hill that they call Tatinid. Arumala sat on this sacred hill after the flood. Buddha sat on this sacred hill. There's always this idea of a hill, and you'll see this in Dogon cosmology as well. The hill representing an elevation of consciousness. Am I making sense?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think something happened where I'm not sure. At Maximum Rising, if you could elaborate on which part that you said that cut out, but something happened where the tribe said that it cut out. They was asking for you to repeat. But yes, you're making sense, and everybody definitely, I'm pretty sure everybody understands, understands, overstands, and understands what you're talking about, Baba. Oh yeah, they got it. Yep. Shout out to at Halle 5G. But yeah, keep going, man. Keep burning it down. I'm gonna have to go get the fire extinguisher in a minute. But yeah, go ahead.
Right?
Go ahead.
So you see, they look at things being Adamic, meaning being made from the earth. But we talk about being atomic or atomic. We're talking about being of the primordial fire. That's who you are. So your primordial fire is the consciousness that basically brings this physical matter to life.
Facts. Yeah.
So you can say that matter is the stuff that could be called the building blocks of the material realm, and information is the instructions for how these blocks are arranged. So you got this atomic consciousness, and you got Atum, the consciousness that experiences awareness through this type of arrangements. Energy also makes physical changes possible. Khepra. Matter holds form, while information is the pattern that reduces what we call uncertainty. So information is tied to the systems that have been arranged and are constantly rearranging themselves. Okay, so it's what is called a quantum system of information, where that can be preserved. We're talking about the science conservation of information, meaning that information cannot truly be destroyed and is always going to be remembered once the information has been formulated. So nothing is ever forgotten. In other words, the universe is in a constant state of expansion. It's expanding some places and contracting in others. But there's even saying that the information, they're speculating that information, even if it goes into a black hole, the information still survives some kind of way.
Yeah.
Once again, so there's a lot of information coming out around the research dealing with longevity too. Okay. And this is where a lot of people, they may stop when they're looking at their physical bodies. Because there's a materialist view of what longevity looks like. And even if you get into Qigong and Taoism, they may talk about immortality being connected to longevity. However, modern longevity movements, it does not appear to be identical with the ancient Kemetic quest for immortality. So ancient Cometians generally sought the transformation and the continuation of the complete person beyond the physical death, where one is transformed into an Akh. So an Akh, being the illuminated being, they tell us that modern biotechnology primarily seeks to delay aging, regenerate tissues, reverse cellular deterioration, or preserve information. This is what they tell you, though. But keep in mind, though, this is what they tell the public. The elites will never come out and tell you that immortality is their true goal.
Yeah.
They don't want everybody else seeing it, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, they can experiment on the public more so this way. Okay? So they can continue to put stuff in your food and continue to put stuff on the air to get you to identify with the finite. So the question becomes, what must be preserved, repaired, renewed, transformed, so that the individual is not erased through what appears to be the passage of time?
You know, and real quick, Baba, that reminds me of because I'm telling you, we went so deep the other night when we were talking, but that reminds me, you remember we was talking about, I don't remember how we got on the subject. I don't know if it was pyramids or what we were talking about, but I remember somehow Dr. York came up, and I remember talking about Ty Marie, but then I remember telling you, I remember sharing with you about how many celebrities was tapped in with Doc, and then we got on the subject of, you remember Mike, when we were talking about Remember the Time, right? So now, when we say remember, member, is there a difference between remember or member? Is there a difference between those two?
The members of Ra? Well, if each and
member
every
or
one
remember?
of us, right? But each and every one of us, when you talk about Ra member, being a member of Ra just simply means that you're extension of the solar logos. You're extension of the spiritual sun. So therefore, when you Ra member, you're tapping into the memory of the sun itself. To remember is to go back and unite with the members. You see what I mean? So when you go back and unite with the members, that's because you have simply forgotten or lost recall that you were never separated in the first place. Just like Asar's members are broken up and scattered.
Yeah.
Asar is brought back together when the members are brought back together.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So in all of her wisdom, all of her beauty, she was not able to find the male member of Osir, which had been eaten by an oxyranchus fish, which is a fish with a snout. That fish ate the penis of Asar, right? So she gave him a gold member. Aset is quite the alchemist. Okay. Remember what she did with the queen with the prince when she went and visited Lebanon. She put him inside of a fire to burn up his mortal parts because she was transmuting him and turning him into a god. She was transmuting him by removing his impurities so he could become a being of light, but they interrupted her. So because the lady got scared, what are you doing? She interrupted the process of Ase burning away the mortal parts of her son. So it indicates that the mysteries of alchemy is found in nature because Aset or As represents nature. She represents the mysteries of nature. So when you're familiar, if you look at the tarot card, there's the high priestess. She's holding a book that's right. In that book, sometimes some depictions of it say Torah or Rota, which Torah or tarot is the same thing. The difference between the Torah and the tarot is one is a book of pictures and symbols, or the other is a book of writings. The book of symbols, here's the thing, I'm just going to drop this jewel. The tarot was not just meant to be something that you read the fortunes with people's fortunes with. The tarot is a Western occult knowledge dealing with the initiatory system where you gaze and meditate upon the symbols to understand what they mean. And each of the 52 cards, right, you know, they represent minor initiations. And you got your major arcana, which is 22, each linked to a Hebrew letter, right? Which is supposed to take you to a different level of consciousness and awaken a certain faculty within yourself. That's your 22, your major arcana, which each is connected to a Hebrew letter, which is the DNA of the Kabbalah, the tree of life. And then you got your 52, which connects to your regular suits that you have in your playing card deck with the two jokers. Was the magician, and the other is the one is the magician, and the other is doggone, they didn't ran. I want to say one's the devil, but you got two. Both represent the trickster cards in your deck.
I was about to say, okay. I could go find a deck real quick. I think I got a couple of decks in here somewhere.
Yeah, but you know, that's it. You need some jokers in your deck in order for you to have the friction necessary for you to be able to self-realize. That's why there's a villain. That's a superhero needs a villain because they need something to go up against so know that they can define their superhero-ness.
That's facts. Oh no. All right, tribe. We're gonna keep pushing through. Like I said, we're already used to it. I know y'all used to it. I'm used to it. So there's always gonna be some attempted pass interference, some interference, some you know, things that's gonna try to stop the flow of the Ashe and the juice. But we ain't gonna let that happen. And you know what I'm gonna do is why Baba come back. I know he's gonna come back. I didn't want to interrupt him, but when he was talking about like the transformation and alchemy and the ability to transmute and the ability to create and to be able to transform one element into a higher state or a higher realm or a higher, you know, experience of an element. One of the things that I wanted to get into, I didn't want to interrupt them, was about the name, right? His name, Khepra, very powerful name. And it's very, very powerfully and deeply connected to transformation. And it's a name that I actually have some attachments to as well. But when we talk about the name Khepra, right, it talks about the transformation, or I should say the story about Khepra, the god, is about transformation. Because for those who are deep into the Kemetic studies and excuse me, the Kemetic sciences and the Kemetic culture and traditions, you'll know that Khepra is a very powerful and a very important, very significant deity in regards to the Kemetic culture. But Khepra comes from the dung beetle, right? And this particular beetle, when they lay their eggs and they get ready to breed and give life to their young, they actually create and lay the eggs in a pile of dung, a pile of poop, feces, shit, like literally. And then the young, the eggs, when they hatch, the young dung beetles have to unfurl themselves out of that bowl of feces in order to be able to come into the world in order to live life. So they go through that transformation process, which is very similar to the butterfly, but I think it's more powerful, especially when it comes to the Kemetic culture, because of the significance of the dung beetle and the deity of Khepra, which is the god of transformation. So right now, I would say that we are looking at transformation on a global scale. And I'm talking about literally all across the globe, whether we're looking at it from a natural perspective, whether we're looking at it from a nature's perspective, whether we're looking at it from a scientific perspective, whether we're looking at it from a systematic perspective, whether we're looking at it from any perspective you want to look at it, this planet is going through a major transformation. I mean, major transformation, and you can't deny it. So it's like the god Khepra is relevant, extremely relevant right now in the process of transmuting and transforming. Couldn't be more relevant than it is right now. So it's like, this is what we're seeing in real time, like for real, for real. And whichever way you're looking at it, I haven't really been paying attention to a lot of the news and a lot of the media as of late, but I'm gonna be tapping back in with the research for the content that we got coming up. Hold on, I think Bubba about to come back in. Let me see. Y'all bear with me 1 second, try, because I think he's coming back in, but it's we got some foolishness going on. Let me see. Oh Lord, it's retrograding again. Ifa Nina. I think we dealt with that not too long ago on the stream. Okay, I see him. I think Bubba back now. But yeah, I wanted to tap into that. Okay, can you hear me, Bubba?
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. Yeah, listen. No, it's a lot of foolishness going on, but
as far as my audio is concerned, it's acting kind of weird.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. It's a lot, man, and it's been happening. It happened to us. It happened to us Friday. I mean, as far as I've been streaming, it's been happening quite a bit. But we're not gonna let it slow us down. But you can hear me now.
Anything on your end?
You don't hear me?
If you can hear me, raise your hand real quick, brother.
I hear you. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Why you don't hear me?
Well, I mean, I could keep flowing, but I don't know if
keep going. I don't know why you don't hear me though. Yeah.
Back and forth.
Keep going. Keep going.
Cool. All right. So, to the ancient Cometians, immortality had to be earned in the example of your identity living forever, right? So it's beyond basically just living within an aging body. Death was considered a dangerous transition during which the different dimensions of the person could become separated, weakened, forgotten, trapped, or even destroyed. So the goal was to restore these components into an effective, luminous, and enduring form. We observed what survives in Africa today. We understand the place of burial is not only a tomb, but also a shrine where the so-called deceased is honored as an ancestor who can not only be sought for guidance, but also capable of serving the people or the family as a spiritual being. And you see this mummification process happening also in the Americas. When you look at the pyramid systems over there and traditions over there, you get this idea that there was some type of common connection with these civilizations, right? And there's been a lot of speculation on that. And of course, Smithsonian is not going to come out and tell you straight. National Geographic is not going to tell you this, and they're not going to tell you this in school because they got to keep the conventional way of thinking alive. So the Cometian was understood as a composite being, okay? And the body was seen as an anchor. Earlier, we talked about what is called the Sahu, meaning the incorruptible body, and how the identity remained important because it was maintained after death. So mummification was more than an attempt to stop decomposition. It provided a stable physical image or an anchor around which the deceased could be ritually reassembled. So the Smithsonian notes that mummification involves a roughly 70-day procedure performed by specialists who combine anatomical knowledge with ritual prayers and actions. And we'll see that in the surviving African tradition, bodies preserved with special methods and utilized. Sometimes the remains are put in pots are under the house of a family in which they can communicate with the ancestor buried beneath. And we see that this is germane to Yoruba tradition as well. There's also reports that in Egypt today, where the Muslims have basically dominated that particular society, at least in secular ways as well. They talk about how they dig up houses in old temples and find that there's sarcophagi under houses of families, indicating that just like the Yoruba, they would bury their loved ones, or especially if they're of importance, under houses and temples, and would speak with them, communicate with them. They understood that the elders had become, or the ancestors become one with the earth, in which you can communicate with the spirit of Geb in the Commission traditions. Same way with the Yoruba, where they have a lot of emphasis on the earth. Like if you're familiar with Ogboni, those are that's the priesthood or the wisdom keepers of the planet. And there's a lot of emphasis on why we should not only take care of the earth, but connect to the earth, because the ancestors dwell within the earth, which is in the Yoruba tradition why there's a lot of feeding of the earth. So this does not necessarily mean that the Commissions believed that the deceased was trapped inside the mummy, okay? Now, the bodily preservation maintained the recognizable identity and provided a secure point of return. So you had these statues, you had these portraits, you had these coffins, and sometimes they would have these Ushapti dolls that you would find inside of the tombs, which are wooden figure that would have like the spirits of the royal court transferred into these wooden figures, okay? Because they didn't want to just kill off all their important officials just to bury them with the pharaoh. When Commission that went through its declining period, they would kill off the whole court so that they could join the pharaoh in the afterlife. And at some point in time, they said, no, we're not going to do that because we're losing important people who can keep the kingdom running. And therefore, what they did is that they created these wooden dolls called Ushaptis. And so when you go into a museum and you see these wooden dolls that are buried in the tomb with the king, that's what those are. Okay. And we still utilize a similar idea in a lot of surviving West African traditions today, where you may have figures or wooden figures that may represent or contain the spirit of an ancestor for those who were here to do the work. Right. So it is believed that when a name is remembered, the ancestor can be called upon and summoned. So when one's name was erased and forgotten about, it suggests that a person has died the second death of being forgotten. And this is why character is so important, because if you did good works, then you'll be remembered and they'll call upon your name and they'll pour water to your ka so that you can still serve the community, okay, even from beyond what they call the grave. So you have the ka, which is the vitality or the vital continuity of a person on earth. And you see how it's raised, like Baba was raising his hands, right? Because the ka also represents that which is on high. So you also want to make sure that your personal ka, your personal spirit, which you're strengthening when you do qigong, martial arts, when you do meditation, you're strengthening your ka, okay? When you do things against yourself, when you allow yourself to be compromised, that weakens your ka. So the word for Ashe, you might consider a Kemetic word, was spirit power, heka, which they call magic, heka, okay? Because it's the power of your ka. Your power of your spiritual devil is what gives you the ability to have this energy that is called Ashe, so you can do the work. You can make things happen without being hindered. So this life force or sustaining double of a person was required to have nourishment as well. So this explains why there's food offerings, drinks, and so on placed in the tombs. You see, the concept of abo was in Kemet. And the thing about it, one of the things I cannot understand, and I love my sisters and brothers who are looking into the ATRs, but I suggest don't look at ancient Kemet as just a phase we went through and we were ignorant because we didn't want to appreciate West Africa and we looked at Kemet as because we didn't know any better. Don't look at it that way. Because the thing about it is that you have universal principles that are built in stone. The ancestors built that for us so that we can remember it, okay? That's why they built and put everything in stone. They knew eventually you did have to get up on out of there and you can't take the buildings with you. But they made those buildings, they made that pyramid almost indestructible so that you can remember the glory of the ancient ones, okay? So anyway, When descendants pronounce the offering formula, the deceased remained as a member of the social and the cosmic community as well. You got this perspective of a community to the ancient ones, which was dealing with constant communication with the other side. So when they talked about communion and community, they deal with common unity. See, so in the church they have communion. Why? Because everybody eats this bread and they drink this wine representing the flesh and blood of Christ, because they're supposed to bring them together as a body. But all this is symbolic ritual from long ago. They're eating the sun. They're eating the bread, which is grown. You're eating basically stuff that was grown in the field by the sun, which is made of grains and so on. And you're drinking great wine. All of this symbolic of eating and devouring the sun. You're eating the sun. You're becoming one with the sun by eating the sun. And eventually you become the body of Christ, or the Karishata, which they've called Christ, which is collectively the sun. Remember, one of the words that the Yoruba call themselves was Omorun, meaning people of the sun, children of the sun. Okay. Also, it can be with a little bit of wordplay, children of heaven, but they're the children of the sun. So when we look at our bodies and the melanin in which we have, it stores the energy of the sun. So we live off the sun's rays, the solar rays, but we also have to be responsible and understood that too much of a good thing. Yes, brothers and sisters, you may have melanin in your skin, but you want to be responsible and cool off from time to time too. You don't want to overheat, because you can take in a lot of heat. You can overheat. That's why in the Yoruba tradition, they talk about keeping your ori cool. It talked about coolness. So you want to have a balance. You see what I mean? And keep in mind, your ancestors coming from a place where there was a lot of warmth, where it gets hot, you're going to look for coolness. As opposed to if you were in a place like further in Europe and Greenland and Iceland, where it's cold, you're going to want to look for warmth. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So we were so hot. We wanted to be cool. So hey man, let's get some of that coolness. Let's get some of that Ori tutus and that Omi tutu. It's about being cool. Okay? We already have the heat. We already have the sun within us. We just need to cool off a bit. That's it. So when you have coolness, that's what they talk about, expansion and Orisha Funfun and so on. A lot of times people who get initiated into the mysteries of Obatala have reported that they have a taste and desire to have ice cream because they're cooling off. That's what that is, to bring you into coolness, to bring balance. There's a lot of heat. Shango, before he was merged with coolness and expansion, which is the royal secret, it represented the mortal part of the person who was hot, angry, and basically covetous, right? He was jealous of his two generals and had them fight to the death, and it led to him basically going out into the wilderness and hanging himself. But it speaks about how he had a choice and made a deal where he had become one with Obatala. So he had the white bead added to the red bead, right? And he became basically their version of Haru Samai Tawi, where Haru Okay, so the screen just did something else. You still there, brother?
Yeah, I hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Peace and blessings.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you. I don't know if I'm back or not. All right, if you're here to raise your hand one more time.
Yeah, I hear you, Baba. I don't know what the hell they got going on there, but I hear you. Yeah.
So
this is weird.
So when we look at the Ka, right? It's more than how some brothers want to say, oh, that's metabolism, that's the metabolic part of yourself. It was dealing with a sacred dimension of life that could receive offerings and continue beyond the death of the individual. So that's important to know. The Ba was commonly represented.
Damn it. I don't know what's going on. Well, I do kind of feel like I know what's going on, family, but y'all, please give us some grace as we work through these technical difficulties, because you already know what this is about. But let me see if I can get Bubba's to be able to hear me and to be able to get him back on the screen. One moment, family.
And the freedom to move between heaven and earth and beyond ordinary physical limitation. So the Ba could go forth by day, but it had to return and reunite with the preserved body. You had this immortality, therefore it depended on both mobility and expansion without loss of identity. So the key word is keeping your identity. So in many traditions, we'll see that birds were symbolic as messengers between heaven and earth. And since they could perch on a branch, or they could walk on the ground and take flight in the air, they were seen as mystical beings, being able to deliver messages from earth to heaven. And they said that there are still people who can shapeshift to this day, who can transform into birds. And you'll find this especially in West African tradition, where they speak about the mothers and their ability to shapeshift into birds. So they say that all women have what is called Ase energy. They say that these women, these mystical women, would meet in the Iroko tree at nighttime, right? So everybody has this ability to astral project. The males have what is called Osho, which is the ability to astral project, and the women have Ase. That's the yin and yang of that. That's how that balances out. That's in the West African Yoruba tradition. Anyway, then you had that part of you that transformed into a luminous being, right? That's not simply another soul part possessed in a fully effective form from birth, okay? You had to build that up. And it was the glorified transfigured condition produced when the deceased successfully passed through judgment rituals and reconstruction and the union with divine powers. They said this person has now become Makaru, meaning that they're now true of voice, right? And you have the Ak. The Ak, the ultimate goal was also when you would basically go beyond the biological maintenance, right, into this transformation into a higher order of being. Now, I learned about this. I'm going to say it was either Russian or Armenian. His name was Gurdjieff, right? And Gurdjieff, I learned about him years ago at the Theosophical Library. He taught that human beings were not born with a fully developed soul. Instead, we began with only the potential for one. So in his point of view, most people live in a state of what he called wake and sleep, right? I call it hypnosis. But either way, they go drifting through life on an automatic reaction type basis. They got these impulses that keep them fragmented. So the soul emerges only when a person learns to be consciously present to observe themselves and unify their scattered inner states into a stable, intentional I. So through sustained awareness and disciplined effort and inner honesty, sounds like Ewa Puele to me, a person gradually builds a soul that's capable of surviving change and challenge, even after death. But from this philosophy, and by the way, Gurdjieff had learned among the Sufis in the Middle East as well, that what survives is the solidified identity. In order for this identity to survive, you have to solidify it while you're on earth. You have to start living truth. So every time you do things out of anger, or you do things out of malice, or you do things when you're forced to do.
Oh. All right, family. We're gonna yeah, this is crazy. This is beyond crazy. All right, we're gonna work through this. I'm not sure what in the hell is going on while we're having this much friction. It's really weird. Give me 1 second, y'all. Give me some grace, please. I'm gonna see if I can holler at Bob Ptah and see if we can get him back in here, because this is crazy. Like, for real. 1 second, try it. 1 second. Okay, can you hear me, Baba?
All right, I'm back.
Can you hear me?
Interesting.
Can you hear me?
On my side, you know that it actually went to a commercial?
Can you hear me? You can hear me? You still can't hear me?
Anyway, if you can hear me, raise your hand, brother.
I hear you. I can't believe you can't hear me. Right. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Whew.
This is crazy.
Agunye.
This is crazy.
Baba Eshu. Give thanks and praise to Baba Eshu.
This is crazy.
Okay, I wanted to talk about another brother he was an Asian that I was introduced to, an Asian brother by the name of Montauk Chia. So a lot of my elders, especially in the Kemetic community, they were into working with the method of what is called the Tao. One of my elders that told me that Taoism was actually a redo of the Comitian system. And the more I studied that, the more I began to see that. Like, for instance, you got your 8 immortals, and you got the Memphite theology that we talked about with when you have the 8 energy patterns: Amun, Amenet, Nununet, Ku, Kuket, and Huhet, where you got these 8 energy patterns. And the same thing goes when you're dealing with the 8 immortals of the I Ching, which represent the 8 trigrams, which is similar to the 16 disciples of Arumala. It's the same concept, you know. So there's a story about how Arumala had went to the Fulani people, wanted to teach them Ifa, but the Fulani people were so high off opium and bickering and fighting that he got frustrated and gave them half the system. So Fulani means those who wear hats. And if you look at the Chinese rice farmers and you look at the Fulani of West Africa, they got these similar looking hats. So some would say that he was talking about the Chinese, and that the Yi Ching is basically half of the 16 Odu, which they have only 64 combinations, where Ifa has 256 different combinations. Anyway, Mantak Chia was he practiced a form of Taoist traditions and a little bit of Buddhist teachings. Now his approach is the same idea from an energetic perspective. And he teaches that humans can create what is called an immortal body. And this immortal body is made of refined life force energy rather than physical matter like flesh and so on. The soul body is cultivated through practices that circulate internal energy, transform emotional states, and harmonize the body's natural systems. So you got techniques like the microcosmic orbit, which you can easily get off of YouTube and learn how to do the microcosmic orbit. There's the inner smile, the fusion of the 5 elements, and it helps practitioners to gather, purify, and stabilize their energy until it forms a coherent inner structure. So it's like you're growing this inner embryo of energy, which has become your light body after you go through what is called physical death. So this structure becomes like a second body. It's subtle, it's luminous, and it's capable of existing beyond physical decay. Although these methods appear to differ, both teachers describe that the soul is something constructed, not necessarily automatically granted. So Gurdjieff emphasizes conscious attention and psychological integration, while Mantak Chia talks about emphasis of energetic refinement through eternal alchemy. So yet both insist that the soul must be strengthened through practice, intention, and self-transformation. In both systems, the incomplete and the developed person is one who has forged a lasting inner presence. So people who actually have developed these inner bodies are reported to have strong magnetism. Every church and somebody walks in, or if this person walks in, everybody in the church is going to turn around and look at this person, okay? Because that's how powerful their energy field is. So these teachers suggest that immortality is not only just living forever, you know, or in a physical body, but also about cultivating an inner form that can endure beyond the physical body. The soul becomes a stable pattern, whether consciousness, energy, or both, and is capable of surviving transitions that the physical body cannot. So from Gurdjieff's perspective, if you die, and if you have not cultivated this light body, there's pretty much nothing left of you from his point of view, right? Some will say that you go back and you just emerge into the internal consciousness. But then again, the illusion is the fact that we're all separated from the eternal consciousness anyway, because like we talked about earlier, we're all connected at the top. And that's why you can get downloads and somebody else can get those same downloads, because each and every one of us are vessels of the divine. So in this way, we look at their version of the teachings of the development of the soul. It's a process of becoming more real and more unified and more enduring. Okay, so you're transforming the human being from a temporary organism into a lasting expression of consciousness and energy. So the Commissions believed immortality had to be earned by developing the Kaaba and ultimately the Ak, which is transformed. It's a radiant aspect of the soul, and it's only appeared when a person lived with truth, discipline, and alignment with Ma'at. This matches the teachings of a lot of mystics that the soul is not automatic, but must be built through conscious effort, self-awareness, and inner unity. And it parallels Mantak Chia's view that immortal body is constructed to refine energy. So you have this emotional mastery, you have this internal alchemy, and all three systems, immortality is not so much the default human feature, but the result of inner work. That is, as far as your identity continuing to live. So a person must cultivate a stable, coherent, and luminous inner structure capable of surviving beyond physical death, according to these teachings. So this is like looking at the variations of immortality and the different schools of thought about what this means. Immortality, this is our version of what is called anti-aging medicine. They looked at the human being spiritually effective, and justified, as well as being imperishable. This is when one went before the 42 judges and basically denied 42 crimes that they had committed or would have committed. Okay, you deny these 42 crimes because you want to make sure that you have at the utmost character. There's a lot of times there's evidence of animal sacrifice that was given on behalf of this person traversing these 42 judges. Yes, the commissions made Ebo. Okay. So if one was not able to get through, and if they basically were in balance with the pen or the feather of truth with the heart, they were denied their immortality. So, in other words, their ren was chiseled away, their name. They were blotted from the book of life, as the Bible speaks about one who is denied eternity. So, to speak, to carve, to copy the name of a loved one or deceased one or someone who was important was to preserve their spirit so that they could be contacted and summoned to do the works. And he did this with temples. They did this with stelae, tomb inscriptions, funerary papyri. It served as technologies of remembrance. I can't really make it out. Hold on, let me see.
No, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yes, Brother Malcolm. There we go.
All of them.
There we go.
Oh,
so yes, we continue. We are pouring libations to the Ka of Brother Omowali, which is his Yoruba name. Malcolm X's Yoruba name is Omowali, also known as Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz.
Yes, sir.
See? So for those who, I heard somebody say that Malcolm X went to Africa and he wasn't welcome there because he said that that wasn't his home. And I have to say, bullshit. He went to Africa and they called him Omowali, meaning a child returns home. Get your facts straight. All these weird conspiracy theories, they make me sick with that. But anyway, Omowali was his name. Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz, right?
Yes, sir.
So when we pour out the Ka, when we pour out to the Ka of an individual, when you go to various initiations, you receive a new name. It talks about in the book of Revelation that the ones who go by will receive a new name, which will be written on the white stone and given to them. See, they were always talking about initiation into the deeper mysteries where people were being taken through rituals. Some say that the story of Jesus is the ritual of making a name. The Purim Heru was a ritual of turning you into an ancestor or an Osiris, an Osar, to turn you into an immortal being. So there is the bodily preservation. You have through your living descendants, ritual recitation, written names, and social memory. All these are forms of immortality, divine recognition for the works that you've done when you were on earth. All of this is forms of immortality. So this introduces this idea of how identity survives in as far as meaningful information as well, and it remains recoverable. So if you do good work so that your name is remembered, people will pour water or pour whatever it is that they pour out to your Ka so that you continue to be summoned and do the work in your community and family. That's why you learn the names of your ancestors. And when you set up your shrine and your altar, you call upon their names because you're bringing new life to them. And then they can do work for you when you offer them food and substances, because the intention itself is what energizes the ancestors. But you got to put some work into it because you're also giving them energy to your ancestors so they can help do the work while they're on the other side and you are here. Eventually, you will become an ancestor yourself, and therefore you'll have those who come after you do the same for you. The commission did not treat a person as, well, just information alone. Their name had to remain connected with the body, their character, their ancestry, offerings in divine order, all there in the so-called tomb. A copy name without other relations was not necessarily equivalent to the complete person, but they had the body there, they had the name, and they may have had the 4 canopy jars containing the lungs, the intestines, the stomach, and in the liver. Okay, so that's Amset, Quesenu, Hapi, and Tamutef. And basically these represent your gut and your lungs, because you have an energy here. How you eat, what you put in your system, right? That was important. Also the things that you spoke, because when you speak things, you are always praying. You're speaking into the atmosphere, which is, so the heart was very important because you wanted to make sure that it was balanced. Okay. A little bit of something extra too. When you get into like certain practices that deal with the Taoist internal alchemy, you want to make it so that your head is cool and your belly is warm. You don't want a cold belly and a hot head. Sounds familiar? Well, here is your Oriade, and your belly is connected to Orienu, which connects you to a Panri in heaven. That's how that works. So you want to have a balanced life force. It's both on the spiritual level and the physical level. We always had as above, so below, as within, so without. You see, it was always holistic because it dealt with fractals and patterns. And this is the way true African, Afra, okay? I'm not talking about Farouk. I'm not talking about Al-Faruqa, meaning divided. I'm talking about Afraka. I'm not talking about Afrique. That was basically who they said that Leo Africanus was, Scipio Africanus was named after, which was actually a part of North Africa. He was actually named after the continent. They didn't name after that part. They didn't name that part of land after him. Okay.
Yeah.
They named him after that part of the land. Okay. Afrique meaning place of birth. Anyway, Afraka in the Kemetic language means the flesh and spirit of Ra. And remember, we talked about Afraka. We're talking about the flesh and spirit of Ra. The Moors say that North America is still Africa. So you might could say wherever we're at, there's Africa, because you cannot take Africa out of us. Africa meaning the flesh and spirit of Ra. The flesh and spirit of Ra, meaning that when you have tapped into what makes you a Nubian, Nub is the Kemetic word for gold, Nubian, meaning that you have become a purified being and that your light body has been activated. So when you go back to the Yoruba concept, the Yoruba traditions, we talk about good and balanced character being one's salvation. You can see through divination who is on the path of Ire, which is expansion, and on the path of Osogbo, which is contraction. So when someone is out of alignment and being off the path, they lack the ashe or the command to be effective in the world. So in other words, without the cultivation of good character and being in alignment with destiny, something in you weakens. Your light begins to contract, you weaken, okay? When you do something that's out of alignment and takes you from that coolness and that inner peace that you're supposed to have, you're causing a part of your spirit to be compromised. You're causing a part of your soul to lack the ashe, to get you to move on, even through the incarnations. The heart or the ab was associated with memory, intention, consciousness, and moral character. It was generally retained in the body because it would testify during judgment. Now, the Quran took this idea saying that there will come a time in the day of judgment where your body parts will bear witness against you. Well, you're a holographic being, so everything you do bears witness of what you're doing and what you're not doing. Because everything you do, the universe knows because you're part of it. You are it and it is you, so you cannot escape it. So, in the judgment scene, the heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, representing truth, right order, justice, and balance, correct relationship, and so on. It means straightness, the way. Okay, it represents, the ability to walk in balance without toppling. The deceased sought to become Makiru, commonly formed as vindicated, true of voice, and justified. This means that immortality was ethical as well as technical. So perfected, preserved mummy, beautifully decorated tomb, all of this was copied to represent the cosmos and the spirit being able to travel throughout the cosmos and so on. Okay, it did not eliminate the importance of character. To become an illumined being, you also have to have good character. So the continuation required harmonization with cosmic order, Ma'at. So here lies the major warning of the longevity programs that we're dealing here with the West, and these folks who think they can was it David trying to think, was it David Rockefeller who had like 7 heart implants? Well, when you put somebody else's heart in your chest, you got different consciousness in your body, but still remembers from being in the other person, and whom you remove the heart from and put it in your own. So, if you heard about back in the day, and the Black community was at an uproar because they were talking about, they had a picture of a young Black teenager, right? And they said organ donor on the cover. Well, I got news for y'all. You know how they said when when they killed us and buried us, but what they did not know is that we were seeds. Well, what do you think is happening when you put somebody else's heart in your chest?
Yeah,
David Rockefeller eventually died. No matter how many heart transplants he had, he still ended up succumbing to death. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got these people who want to use, technology to live forever. All right. We're going to get into that one day because Master Naba, if you remember Master Naba, the Earth Sender, he's basically said that there is two teachings. One way of obtaining immortality by allowing yourself to come back through a descendant. And the other way is by keeping the same body forever. Well, how do you keep the same body forever? They keep the sets teachings is to keep the same body forever because they wanted to do it with technology. Okay. That's where transhumanism comes into play. Because you see, the elite is also practicing a form of alchemy. And like I said earlier, they will never tell you that their true goal is immortality. They're going to get you to be like, oh, these guys are just incompetent. Their medical system don't work. Well, maybe not for you, but they're perfecting their own medical system among themselves to figure out how they can practice alchemy and become gods and live forever. Whether it's downloading their consciousness into a computer and uploading it into an android, the alchemy of the process is eventually to build an organic body that cannot get sick and cannot die. That's what they're trying to do. That's what their goal is. Okay. So, but they have to test us. They have to test us with, as far as guinea pigs. Okay. I see what somebody said, get out. Yep. Exactly. So they've even tried to infuse their consciousness within our bodies, into the bodies of the melanated. That's something that they have been doing and trying in so many ways to figure out what they can do to bypass our blues. They want our rhythm, but they don't want our blues. So they've been trying to steal our rhythm from us, okay, and allow us to keep the blues. I'm like, oh, you don't want the whole experience. Hey. Anyway, that's another story. The Commission tradition, okay, so going back to what we talked about, the guy I mentioned earlier, Gurdjieff, he had what was called the fourth way. So you can look that up. Gurdjieff is spelled like Gurdjief. I think that's two F's. Yeah, Gurdjief. Okay, just look up Gurdjieff in the fourth way. And Montauk Chia's internal alchemy, right? Heavy heart. It all represents a person whose inner life is unbalanced, unrefined, and therefore not ready for immortality. Okay, Ewa Prele in the Yoruba tradition is basically a way to obtain immortality by fulfilling your destiny and doing what you're called to do and not let anybody interfere with that no matter what. Okay, you have to figure out what that is. So they say that when you were born, when you came down the birth canal, you forgot your original purpose and your mission. So that's what divination is. That's where that comes in, so that you can remember. Some people end up remembering anyway. Okay, it's just a tool. Okay, nothing is the ultimate end all be all because everything is expression of universal consciousness and universal mind. It's dependent on how you do it. They say it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So in Kemet, the heart was weighed against the feather of Mot, is a heavy heart that meant for the person that not cultivating truth, discipline, harmony, or self-mastery. So the soul could not transform into an Akh, the radiant immortal form. So Gurdjieff, he described that same principle psychologically as having the heavy heart, right? So you have a heavy heart, the person is ruled by automatic reactions. A lot of people is run by their subconscious, okay? And their subconscious bites them in the ass every time because they have no control over their subconscious. So years and years of programming, years and years what they've listened to on the radio and the TV, what their parents told them when they were children, how they're not going to make it, how they're not going to be shit, and all that stuff that wears on you because if it is put in the back of your mind and your subconscious will build layers of information on top of that information, and it becomes like a computer virus working in the back of your mind, creating limitations and blockages and so on.
Facts.
All right. So this is where RE work comes into play. This is where shadow work comes into play and so on. So such a person who has all these inner contradictions and scattered emotions and heavy-heartedness, they said that they have no unified I. So they cannot form the stable soul substance that survives death. So Montauk Chia explains that energetically, heavy emotions like fear drains and scatters the life force, preventing the creation of the refined energy body that becomes the immortal body. And the Yoruba, they believe that when we transition, we can either go to good heaven, right? Or we can go to what is called uh, Orumburuku, which is the bad heaven. Also, heaven apere meaning the heaven of pot shards. Why pot shards? Again, pot shards represent something broken, shattered, and scattered. And all of these systems, immortality requires a lightness. It requires, if something is going to be broken up, it has to come back together because that is the alchemical process. You see?
Yeah.
Somebody said they've been unsuccessful. Let them ask Clive Davis. Sure. Well, here, you know, when you're dealing with Ma'at and you're dealing with balance, truth is always going to prevail. Okay? That's the whole point. They're trying to use artificial means to become gods and so on. They done read the ancient texts and it's like, okay, well, I tell you what, Adam Cadman was a male and female. So what do they do? I'm just going to get blunt because nobody wants to hear this. What do they do? In order to bring back Adam Cadman, they want to confuse everybody about which gender they are. And then they put the funding, the very people who is into the Kabbalistic practices, okay? These Jews and so forth, okay? Fake Jews, not real Jews, fake ones, right? Who have Kabbalah and mysticism, and they studied the idea of the Adam Cadman. They're going to bring that back, right? And they're going to basically try to manipulate human beings so they can experiment on creating beings who are either genderless or have both genders. That's what they're doing. That's their alchemy. It's a cult base. That's why they put so much funding into somebody getting their ranker chopped off, but you can't even get funding for a scholarship if you're trying to go to college, because that's where the money is going. It's on projects like that. Okay? To get you to argue about whether a male is a male and a female is a female and other stupid shit that we ain't got no business arguing about at this time. So, in a sense of being carefree, about just being carefree when you have lightness, but it's a sense of having a purified emotional body, discipline awareness, and a coherent inner structure. So immortality is denied not so much as a punishment, but because of a disorganized, heavy inner state simply, which cannot endure. So only a cultivated, balanced, luminous self can. That's why Commission tradition was always talking about love being identified with Marut, Mer, hence Tameri, or Tamare, if you may, the cultivated land. Mary, Mary meaning beloved land, the cultivated land. Ile Ife, the expanded house. It was always about expansion and cultivation. And from the perspective of the ancients, this is what love is, which is why it's hidden in the word evolve. So one thing I want to also point out is that the power elite and those who were controlled by the system of the feet of the demiurge, okay, we'll talk about the demiurge one day. They want to keep people divided, fragmented, especially us. They want us divided, fragmented, locked down. What better way to do it when they constantly tell you to show that you're powerless? For instance, they're constantly showing how we are dealing with police brutality. Recently, they talked about this young man being murdered by his white friends and so on. They can't find any evidence. Nobody's speaking up and so on. Or what happened with the Asian guy who shot the young man and over some bottles of water, which he actually put back, right? They're always going to show you these images. Why? Because they want you to be riled up, upset, so they can keep you from cultivating the energy in which you have within you. They want to keep you looking outside of yourself. At the same time, they want to keep you in a state of being reactive. So I'm not saying to let people get away with what they're doing. But what I want people to understand is that you got to become proactive, not reactive, because they take parts of your soul when they can manipulate you and get you to do things and use you against yourself. Okay? That's what they've been doing to us with their media. They use us against ourselves. And then, you got a bunch of, when you're read Sun Tzu's Art of War.
Yes, sir.
How they keep, because, that way you can feed them propaganda and get them to go out and do what you want them to do. Well, that's what they're doing. They're constantly showing how violent, how organized, and how unorganized black folks are and what a threat black folks are. And a lot of people, they look at this media and propaganda and come up with this idea that, oh my goodness, we're going to have to do something about these Negroes. You see how they basically do the Emmett Till thing, how they basically do the Rose when they did the Black Wall Street, right? And
Move
also the other
movement.
7 towns that they destroyed were
Yeah,
lying and had a
Rosewood.
bunch of angry, dumb, dumb mobs go and destroy these towns. That's what they do with propaganda.
Yeah,
So what you have to do is you have to always think in terms of being ahead where you're not used against yourself. Okay.
facts.
So
Yeah,
one of the things too is, to be honest, I'm going to tell you something. To be honest, I'm actually proud of us for handling this situation more strategically than they expected us to.
oh
Because a
yeah.
lot of us, we didn't run headlong into the streets and start being, doing crazy stuff and getting cut down. Okay. So a lot of us are starting to learn the patterns because you see, nowadays there's more information. People can turn on the news, they can look at whatever type of news coverage they want to, and they can basically say, you know what? All right, this might be crazy over here, but I'm starting to see a pattern. And there's more history and information available than ever before, as far as being put out, where it's literally at your fingertips. You
Can you
see,
hear
and
me,
so a
Baba?
lot of us is beginning to wake up to their strategies and
Can you
so
hear
on.
me,
So the
Baba?
magic that has been worked or was being worked on us was to get us to believe that we were never nothing and can never be anything. And that has failed. So those who practice the wicked magic on our sisters and brothers, they do things like poke us or set up bureaucratic systems, knowing that we have to navigate them. And the idea is to frustrate you. That's what that idea is for. So they compound this by keeping us having a weak life force, sadness, anger, frustration, fear, and not to mention lack of proper nutrition among things that
Yeah,
contribute to this condition.
yeah,
When we do the proper work to restore our life force, like the techniques I spoke about, you can get like the microcosmic orbit, you can get that off of YouTube and learn how to do that. Dude, there's the 6 Tibetan rites that you can learn how to do for longevity. They show you all these things. You can get that information. And basically those who do to learn about the 6 Tibetan rites and basically their movements that actually add to your longevity. They do it in Tibet. At first it was something that was secret. You can get it off of YouTube now. They don't care. See, the whole idea is information overload, right? Get a little bit of information, turn off YouTube for a day, and let your brain begin to digest information. Just turn it off for just one day, okay?
yeah.
I didn't say
Don't
every
turn
day,
off Ashe
because what
though.
it
Don't
is, a
turn off
lot of us
Ashe.
are suffering from information overload. So the
Yeah,
mind, I'll give you an example. When you were in school and the teacher basically took out a book and said, okay, you got 5 minutes to read 2 pages. Well, when you first did the reading, right, your mind have been like a sponge, but you can only comprehend so much of it at a time. And they were rushing you, telling you that you have to hurry up and have this done, and we're going to give you a quiz on it. Here's what the human mind does. The mind will take in so much information at a time, digest it, break it down. You see what I mean? Which is why Christians talk about when they finally do read the Bible, they get something new out of it every time they read it. Or even when someone reads a comic book, they get something new out of it that they missed before. And like, well, I don't remember that being in there, because the mind has to process the information, it has to digest it. So if you're constantly just being fed information all the time, I'm talking about you're constantly like watching documentaries, at some point in time, you got to let your brain digest it. Otherwise, it's all for nothing, because you'll forget it all, or you won't be able to recall any of it because your mind is too saturated with too much information. So you got to give yourself a time to digest the information. That's all. You see.
Baba, can you hear
But
me? Can
a
you hear me,
lot of
Baba?
people is bombarded with information, and they think these thoughts are coming from them, and these thoughts are coming from elsewhere. People are getting depressed and pissed off, don't know where it's coming from, and all this stuff, as well as the craziness that comes over the airwaves. So yes, connect with the planet. Go out where the trees are at, fast from it for a day or two. Sadness, anger, frustration, fear, okay? All of these things decrease your aura when you stay in that state for too long, okay? So I remember one of the Ogunda verses, and it's not coming to me right now. There's one of the verses of Ogunda that had mentioned that if you're sad all the time, it will lead to bad health, and that's true. So you literally have to do things that where you will actually. It's almost like you have to cultivate happiness within yourself. Okay,
Facts.
you have to find a
Baba,
way to
can you hear
cultivate
me?
happiness
Can you
within
hear me
yourself.
speaking?
And just because you got some weirdos who don't want you to be happy, don't let that stop you from being happy, because the whole idea is to get you away from being happy. So you'll start producing all the cortisol in your body. You have develop all these health problem and everything else. And, you know, you start to develop internal sicknesses and disease, and your life force becomes weaker and weaker. So I talked about Montauk Chia. There's a such technique called the inner smile. And, you know, I like to give you a little bit of something before you wrap it up. The inner smile, what you could do is sit in meditation and imagine yourself smiling. You don't have to be sitting like, you don't have to do all that. You can if you want to. If you do, you're going to notice though. If you do a physical smile for more than 10 minutes, if you try to maintain that smile, guess what? It changes your mood because it sends signals to the brain to change your mood and send out endorphins into your body that are healthy endorphins. So another thing you can do is visualize a smile on your face when you're meditating. You can visualize a smile. Let's say you got your liver, it holds depression, right? In Chinese medicine. So you visualize a smile in your liver. If you're a lot of anger, right? Too much anger, you can cultivate the anger and use that for art and creativity if you know how to transmute it. But to be festering in anger, that can do a lot of harm to you. So you want to do stuff like imagine a smile on your liver. You can imagine your whole body being one smile. And when you're out in the public, right? If you're smiling, right, internally, don't go around cheesing. You don't want people to think you're weird and crazy, okay? If you're going on a job interview or whatever you're doing, imagine a smile on your face, and the people around you will subtly pick up on that subconsciously. That's how that works. So, you know, like I say, you smile long enough, it'll change your mood, it'll change your vibration and so on, just as the Hermetic teachings of Kybalion tells you to. And the beautiful thing about this is, like I said, you can visualize a smile on your face. It'll expand your auric field. You don't have to worry about going around looking crazy. Another technique you can do is smile on all of your internal organs, you know, and just see how you feel after that. Sit still and have a smile. They used to say have a coconut smile. I just say have a smile. Let yourself feel happy, because happiness is also connecting to a feeling. It's not necessarily an intellectual process. The intellect can be involved, but at the same time, there's ways to have a healthy relationship with yourself and expand your auric field when you're in a place of happiness and inner peace. They call that's the Alafia part of you, right? That's what they call the Hetep part of you in the Kemetic traditions. Now, Sar, more commonly called Osiris in the Greek-derived terminology, embodied regeneration after his violent fragmentation due to Set, right? His body was dismembered. It was gathered, ritually restored through the actions of Aset, Nebutet, and Anpu, right? And then, indeed, inner love, inner smile, raise your vibration just with a smile. Yes, smile, smile. We've been taught to frown and mad dog everybody all day, okay? You go down to the corner, you see your brothers and sisters hanging out on the street, mad dogging you, mean mugging, because they don't want anybody to mess with them. So that's what they do to build a wall of protection around themselves, but it becomes toxic. You don't have to go around smiling at everybody openly. Just visualize the smile in your face. And what that does is that people will feel the energy. You see what I mean? That way, like I said earlier, you don't have to look crazy to people. Okay, so Asar, he did not simply return back to the ordinary mortal existence, right? He became the ruler of the alchemicalized or transformed dead, those who have been transformed into Asarian beings. He's the Lord of Asar Neferkam, which means Asar, the Lord of perfect blackness, right? The Asar Neferkam is an aspect within our subconscious, Amenta, the Amenta within us. So we're talking about the first aspect of alchemy here. We're talking about first there's integrity, then there's this process of fragmentation, then there's this process of recollection, then this reassembly, then there's this activation, and then you're transformed into this more a being of continuity. And this can be found in the teachings of alchemy. Okay. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Asking me to check my
no, that's audio. Me. I hear you. That's me. I hear you.
Okay,
but you can't hear me. I don't know what the hell is going on. So everybody else do.
So the logic of regenerative medicine, you got this aging, you got disease, you got all this stuff. The fragmented biological order where DNA is damaged. Now, one of the newer fields of genetics is epigenetics, which I think is something very fascinating. And it talks about the regulation that becomes disorganized, right? And how the stem cells start to recline, proteins, how they lose their proper structure, and even the tissues, they cease communicating efficiently. So there's modern rejuvenation science that attempts to identify these damaged components and reestablish down. Would believe that we are born and we live in this tabula rasa, which is mean that we're this clean slate. But that's not necessarily the case. The fact of the matter is that you continue from what your mother and father had going on. You see, even the Jewish Bible talk about how the sins of the mother and father goes down 7 generations. So this, but there's a symbolic comparison other than literal as well. But I wanted to show you this process because it's understood by the occult teachings, especially alchemy. The ancient Cometians were not secretly performing modern gene therapy the way they do it today, right? Nonetheless, these systems also imagine survival as requiring the restoration of organized. Years ago, when I first came into Yoruba tradition back in the 90s, I remember I met up with a Babalao. He's the Babalao, Puerto Rican Babalao from I want to say he's from New York. His name was Truth. Anyway, I remember him talking about the first thing he talked about how in the beginning, Obatala brings the light and it up into pieces and scatters it. Okay. Now, of course, people are going to identify or connect Eshu and Set when it comes to this. But I want to make something really clear. Our idea of the devil being this villain, it was not the same idea that our ancestors had with Set and Eshu. Okay. So it's no real comparison because they had a misunderstanding of what the opposite force was to represent. And it was supposed to represent that helps us define our character. Okay. So it's not, we don't necessarily believe that there's some entity that's trying to snatch your spirit or your soul to dwell with it for eternity, burning up in the hellfire. Okay. We understood this as a process that one goes through a purification. Now, there is the idea of you losing your identity and being fragmented, but conscious awareness is always going to exist. Life is always going to find a way to exist. So Ra's nightly journey through the Duat represents immortality as repeated regeneration rather than a frozen form of permanence. Remember, the Kybalion teaches that nothing stays still.
Oh man, listen, family. I mean, I got an idea of what's going on, and this is terrible. It's actually, yeah, Iwa. That's what I'm gonna say, Iwa, because it's not a coincidence that this is happening. It happened Friday with Dr. Valentine. It's happening. They're having the whole show with Baba Ptah. I'm gonna call him real quick, family, and see if we can figure out when we can kind of get back to finish this up the right way because there's a lot going on. So I want to make sure that we get this conversation to be what it was and what it is and what it's supposed to be. So give me 1 second, family. I'm gonna holler at Baba real quick off air to see if we can reschedule this round 2 real quick, expeditiously because this is nuts. 1 second, family. Okay, family. Peace and blessings. Man, this is you know what? This is just a small things to a giant. That's what I'm gonna call it. It's small things to a giant. Parasites, fleas to a dog, like to a big dog, because that's what this is. But we already know what it is. If you are new to the channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're not new to the channel, I'm pretty sure you already know what this is and what we deal with. But at the end of the day, we're gonna keep doing the work, and we're gonna continue to push forward the information and to deliver the messages of the ancestors. So I just spoke to Baba Ptah. We're gonna I'm gonna reconvene with him real quick off air. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up, and then what I'll do, family, is I'll get the edited version uploaded on the channel as soon as possible, so that way you can at least enjoy what we did or what we were able to put out there tonight. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I'm gonna call Baba Ptah, and we're gonna see when we can get this thing rescheduled to do it the right way. And so shout out to Don Coolio. I saw what you were saying in the comments, family, about the questions, and he couldn't hear me. But like I said, I don't feel like it's, I really don't feel like this is technology. I feel like it's a little bit more to that, but whatever. We already know what it is. But a shout out to everybody for rocking with us and fighting through these technical difficulties. Shout out to Kuan Yin 1556, Samaya, Carter 7479, Khadijah. Appreciate y'all, family. Washita Wellness Center. Everybody, man, I appreciate all y'all, family. I really do. Shout out DJ Kiko, Lady Night Walker, the whole tribe, man. We appreciate all our regulars. We appreciate all our new members, everybody who's joining the family. We appreciate all of y'all. But I'm gonna definitely I'm gonna call Baba Ptah when I get off, and we're gonna set up when we can bring this back and do it and finish it the right way. So with that, family, we'll definitely be back in the very near future. We got some new guests coming to the show, to the tribe. I'm looking forward to that. And then we got some other elders and distinguished guests that'll be back in the very near future, as well as Baba Ptah, which has been a little minute since he's been here. So I definitely look forward to finishing up with this one. And I appreciate y'all. Shout out to Zimmy Locks for those who are showing love to the style, man. That's Zimmy Locks. She might be still on. She actually might still be on the feed, but I know she was on here earlier, man. So yeah, shout out to Zimmy. I appreciate you, Zimmy. Tribe showing you love, so I wanted to give you your love too. So yeah, with that, family, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up so I can call Baba Ptah so we can see when we can recap and bring this thing back, which we will be doing, expeditiously as soon as we can align our schedules. So I'm gonna holler at him, and I'll definitely keep you all posted. And we'll be back. We got a lot of new content coming this week, so we're back, family. So with that, I appreciate all the love, the support. I definitely appreciate the patience, family, because as y'all can see, this is definitely something and a message that they didn't want us to put out there to y'all, and y'all know we're gonna keep on doing what we do. So with that, hashtag Ase Tribe, we here now. So I'll see y'all on the next episode, family. I appreciate the love, the support. Please like, share, subscribe. We're out, family. Peace.
Ẹni tó gbàgbé ilé ṣàpò ìyàgbọ́ tẹ́ǹtì ẹni takísà ní tàtàn ò bá padà sílé anítìjàkọ ẹja lọ pé eégún mo ṣe ní gbẹ́rẹ́ ìpàkọ́. Forsake not your ancestors and praise your